The first responsibility of a business is to stay in business. And that's basically what's been the focus over the last 10 years or so. It's horrible to see what you have to do to cut. I mean, you have no control over the quality of the job you're doing.
This is the fight of community journalism, an old, revered, and vital industry hobbled by time, evolving to a world of rapidly developing culture and technology. It's the fight of a threatened industry with no clear successor, the fight of businesses that have a societal obligation to stay in business, and the plight of us all where communities risk being lost to an ever-connected globe. Changing times have killed entire fields unable to adapt, a fact that is to be expected, yet community journalism is unique among industries, for beyond just being a business, local media holds the communal responsibility to inform, inspire, and make us feel as belonging. Local journalism, thus, must boldly face the difficult yet essential task to develop with a new era. There once was a time when local community news was not only highly profitable, but fundamentally more respected than how it is today. Relations between the media and citizens were strong. Newspapers published frequently, sometimes 2 editions in a day. And the papers helped ensure that the electorate was always politically active and informed.
We used to get newspaper delivery, and we would get the morning daily paper, we'd get the afternoon paper. So there was just a lot more news. I think the idea of having a paper that got published and delivered in the afternoon is just such, and it's just like a new world now.
The daily newspaper in the town where I grew up in upstate New York had a guy who covered the fire department. And Eddie never missed a fire. He was always there. And I said, how does Ed do it? How does he manage to get to all these fires? And, that's tough. And they said, well, it's easy. If it's at night and Ed is home, when the fire breaks out, one of the trucks swings by Eddie's house and picks him up. That's how he gets there. Now, you can't quite imagine that kind of thing happening today. But back then there were a lot of close-knit relations between reporters and their sources.
So there were some years there we were growing 25% a year in sales. It was like very dynamic, and that's when we went, the Packet and the Ledger at the time went twice a week because we had so many ad pages, and we had our own printing plant that it was very hard. Then we looked at going daily or more times a week. We went across the country, did a very exhaustive research, and decided that we wanted to keep the niche, stay in the niche that we were, because if we were a daily, then we would be competing with not only the other dailies in the area, but the New York Times.
Today, local media has hit the bump of a new foreign era, in which the industry has yet to figure out how to orient itself. With the rise of the internet, revenue from advertisements have shifted online. readers find themselves with increasing sources of news, from social media to blogs and pundits.
It's not surprising to anyone that staff levels are low. The reasons are clear. A lot of the business that newspapers used to do has gone online. They've gone to websites like Craigslist. They've gone to news websites. And the subscription revenue and the classified revenue was 2/3 of the average daily paper's financial stream. So when you lose 2/3 of your income and you're still committed to being a profit-making enterprise, something's got to give. And unfortunately, that's staffing. The thing that I think is unfortunate is that some businesses have equated this loss of revenue with loss of interest, but the interest didn't really go away.
Local newspapers have missed the boat when it comes to technology. They don't know how to use, or they didn't know how to use Facebook or Twitter or social media. And these things, these media have basically replaced the local community newspaper in most communities. What you lose when that happens is the judgment. Local editors know the community. They vet the content that they show to their communities.
For local papers, they don't know how to diversify, and that's the greatest obstacle. And, it costs money to invest in technology, so it's taking a chance, and you're making an investment, and so some people don't want to do that.
A lot of the digital reading, it's snippets, whereas a newspaper you would sit down and it would be sort of a friend you're visiting with on a weekly basis or throughout the week. A lot of great people moving in from Asia, India, China, really added great diversity to the community, but a lot of those folks had their own concentrations with their families and their own organizations, and they saw our publications as not relating to their communities as much. And we tried to work with some of these communities, have outreach, and it was very hard to get members of those communities to be regular readers.
With such declines in funding, newspapers have been squeezed out of providing much political news, shifting its focus gradually to more soft news. It's a problem for local papers nationwide. In 2017, professors Danny Hayes and Jennifer Lawless published a study over local news. Its findings were troubling, that less and less local news reported on political affairs, and that as a result, political engagement nationwide was dropping. In just the years from 2010 to 2014, local news coverage of U.S. House campaigns had dropped in nearly every way, from the number of issues mentioning the candidates to the number of political stories.
Well, I think it's an understandable trend in that to get somebody to go to a municipal meeting that starts at 8 p.m. and that might last until 11:30 or midnight on a Wednesday night is not always the easiest thing to get somebody to do. In comparison, to sit back at your office and wait for the farmer's market to send in some nice publicity photographs of children who are happily enjoying their trip out with mom and dad to the market, that's relatively easy to do. So there is a barrier to reporting municipal news, and it requires some real effort and some real time commitment.
Local community newspapers, I think a lot of them are trying to avoid controversy in any way that they can. What's more controversial than politics and or maybe religion? I would love to have an editor. I would love to be able to pay a full-time reporter a livable wage. I have a dear friend who's a graphic designer who comes in and helps me with the paper for free. She doesn't charge me a penny. I've tried to pay her, she won't, and what I can pay her is not what she's worth. That's a problem. That's a big problem for me. It's not a sustainable model.
You know, I'd say 10% of what's being covered now versus what it was covered 20, 30 years ago by the weeklies and dailies. I mean, there's stuff out there, but is it useful? Is it factual? Is it helpful?
On our website, I have this quote at the top of the page, and it's by Krista Tippett, who is on National Public Radio, and she says that no challenge before us is more important and potentially life-giving than that we come to see and know our fellow citizens, our neighbors who've become strangers.
Back in the early 1800s, famed New York newspaper editor Horace Greeley likened local newspapers to the printed diary of the hometown. Greeley likely found that local journalism held the responsibility of fostering community, and people today seem to agree. In a 2010 survey conducted in the Netherlands, researchers found that there are 7 things that society expects their local media to do. Of course, there's to supply unbiased information about the town, but there's also to provide inspiration, representation of various groups, and perhaps most critically, to ensure a sense of belonging to everyone within the community.
I meet new people every month, and I form new relationships every month. And it's that relationship forming in the era of the internet that I worry we're losing. And we'd like to do our part, keep that alive.
You know, I wake up every morning excited about going to work because I know I'm going to run into somebody with some story that's exciting. And the realization is going to be that that person does not just have an exciting story, a fun story to be told, but the person lives around the corner from me. I mean, how much better can it get?
Community newspapers, they serve a really important purpose. They connect us, they bring us together in a geographical way. The web, I think, also does things more in an interest-based way. But a community newspaper is geographical. It's about your neighbor. It's not interest-based. It's what's your neighbor? What is your elected official doing?
For local politicians, a healthy local community newspaper also serves as a critical check to their decision-making and authority. Newspapers serve as the community's eye, an objective third party essential to the integrity of municipal government.
There was a lot of interest, especially the first time I ran for mayor, because the Princeton Township and Princeton Borough had just consolidated, and this was the first election for mayor of the consolidated Princeton. I was meeting with members of the local press. I tried to do that. We have council meetings every other Monday, so the afternoon before the council meeting, I'll have just an open availability with the local press if they have any questions about issues that either are on the agenda for that night or anything else they want to ask about. I make myself available. Sunlight is a great disinfectant. As a former journalist, I just think that it's so important. I mean, being on the other side now, I don't always cherish being forced to talk about certain things when they're sensitive or when things aren't going 100% right, but I understand how important it is. And I think it does help make sure that the community knows what's going on. I mean, government is an extension of the residents, so it is important that information gets out there in an unfiltered way.
Localities generally come in media ecosystems, that is, an information flow comprising of social media, local television, local radio, and, of course, local newspapers. Yet, of all stories in the ecosystem, researchers have found that around 8 out of 10 stories simply restate previously reported information, and of all original reporting in the ecosystem, 95% of it comes from traditional sources, mostly from the community paper.
We're doing original reporting. We have a staff, and also we have freelancers that we can turn to do the actual research and the actual interviewing. Without that, obviously the aggregators would have no content. So, we see that as a way that we're an important element of the whole process.
I think that over the last couple of years, what we've seen is the credibility of some of those sources dwindle. That's really where people have started to value credible news sources again. So that's actually shifted in our favor.
I think that the newspaper has got to be out in front of the readership and seeing things that the readership should know or would like to know, even if they don't know that they would like to know it. And I think the quality of the reader experience with print is still a lot higher than it is online. And I think that one of the challenges for the online people is acquiring that discipline that you get when you have to tell a story in so many words, and you have to get people's attention. And I think it's tempting when you're online to just disgorge a bunch of words into your computer and say, there it is, I've done it. Bing, pasted, posted online, we got it. And the newspaper editor, the print newspaper editor, has to be a lot more judicious in terms of what he or she runs, what they don't run, and how it's presented.
Some people happen to be in the right place at the right time, or you have the right vision, or you took the right track. You might have had 3 different roads to go, because a lot of people are smart and they just pick the wrong track, because a lot of people don't know what the end result, they think that they know. And so you have so many people doing this, and there are a lot of people who failed, but if they had the right combination, they would have been the winners, because that's just the way how new opportunities present themselves.
In New Jersey's 2018 budget, lawmakers set aside $5 million in funding for community journalism. It's nowhere near enough to revamp the industry, of course. The state, after all, is just experimenting. But it is the start of a unique initiative. For many local newspapers, funding appears as an increasingly appealing option, although not to all.
I would say that it's not needed. There are ways to diversify, to generate revenue, and you have to be creative and proactive. And if you're just going to rest on your laurels, then yes, everything is going to become difficult and there will be problems.
However, proponents of the legislation argue that such funding isn't to save the journalism industry per se, but rather a government-supported effort towards keeping people informed. Still, government funding raises the question of potential bias in future reporting.
I think it's kind of a wait and see at this point. I think that if the media outlet being funded can remain unbiased, then it's a success. And if, hopefully if this doesn't become a backdoor for a government mouthpiece.
Of course, newspapers have initiatives of their own. In the changing environment, one common solution has been to deviate from the standard newspaper format and engage in niche reporting, filling new markets that don't necessarily compete with other papers and, more importantly, aim to engage readers.
I personally believe that there's a strong future for media in niche content or very specific vertical content. I think that it would be a mistake for media companies not to look at ways to focus specifically on areas that there's a demonstrated interest in their community. For example, food or events. We believe that there are great reasons to be very comprehensive with that kind of content.
It is very interesting. The web is filled with shallow news. It's filled with everybody trying to be the first to get the news out over. We're never going to win that battle. I mean, we're not a breaking news type of place. But what we can do is offer, go a little bit deeper into the news than what a traditional newspaper would do. And our monthly format enables us to do that.
Running a newspaper is, of course, a business, and as such, requires editors to be highly strategic. Over time, newspaper executives have come up with novel ways to maintain strong relationships with its reader base and encourage business.
People aren't willing to pay as much for their content, but at the same time, we still have a duty to deliver the news to the community. And we also need to provide our advertisers with enough readers to make their message palatable. So for that reason, what we do is we've moved to a free circulation model where 18 to 20,000 people get the Princeton packet on their doorstep or on newsstands, or you can subscribe to it and get it in the mail.
We will reach out to the local businesses and tell them that we're writing this article and that their ad would complement the article. And so we'll have like different themes, and then we will write an article related to the topic, and we are proactive in that sense. We do send reporters to McCarter Theater to review a show, and the readers enjoy that, and McCarter Theater likes it as well. So it's a win-win situation. The technology has helped to keep us healthy. We have the Princeton Magazine online store where we actually sell products that are related to Princeton from Princeton merchants or artists.
I don't know that technology necessarily competes with our business. We've used it to really enhance what it is that we do. 25 years ago, you got your weekly Princeton packet, and we actually had to publish a second edition that would come out in order for you to get an update on that story or some breaking news. And what we've been able to do is use our website, our social media channels, as well as we have an opt-in email subscriber list to provide those updates and breaking news as they happen during the week.
We haven't remained stagnant, whether it's through technology or programmatic advertising. We've embraced the change and changed with the world.
I think in some ways we're bucking the national trends. We have a really robust local newspaper climate here, which is great. We have a lot of really smart people. They want to get the story right. They want to be fair. I think we're really lucky. I think it's a good thing for the community, and it's a good thing for the government too.
The story of local newspapers is less about the contemporary relevance of an industry, but rather about an integral industry's journey to adapt continuously to changing technology and culture. For newspaper executives, it's less a race against each other, but rather a race against the environment, a world that opens up new markets and opportunities as often as it takes them away. Community newspapers hold the responsibility of continuously developing new initiatives to remain viable. There's little guarantee that every paper will succeed in doing so. After all, with each initiative comes a serving of risk. But at the twilight of a fleeting era, local journalism will continue to hurt its communities and sing a song to bring us home.